Welcome to this rapid revision video looking at the Wall Street crash and its effects on Germany in 1929. What was the Wall Street crash? You won't need to know the full complexities of why the Wall Street crash happened. You will need to know how it affected Germany. Here's the basics. In October 1929, there was a financial panic in the USA. Share prices and people's investments in companies collapsed. People rushed to sell their shares and withdraw their money, leading to a run on the banks which couldn't pay up, lacking the actual physical cash. On the 24th of October 1929, 13 million shares were sold. This was known as Black Thursday. Shares lost 95% of their value in just one day. $4,000 million was wiped out in 1 week. This was the start of the Great Depression, with mass unemployment and hunger. And Germany was far from immune. So what were the effects of the Wall Street crash on Germany? This is going to get pretty busy, this slide, so you might want to make it full screen and make sure you're playing in HD. Firstly, there was a banking crisis. German banks invested heavily in American companies. As these went bust, German banks lost their money. Realising this, German account holders rushed to the banks to withdraw their savings, only to find that the banks didn't have the physical cash there. When banks like the German Civil Service Bank went bust, people lost their savings, again, just as they had done in the hyperinflation. There was also an investment crash. Germany's economy was reliant on American money and loans. Suddenly, the USA was demanding the repayment of these loans, needing the money itself. German companies found that they were unable to pay back those that had loaned them money. Without money to invest, industries, agriculture and businesses went bust too. And this led to unemployment. As businesses closed or scaled back production, they laid off workers. As production fell and orders dwindled, even more workers got sacked. Unemployed workers couldn't afford to spend in other businesses. Even more were made redundant. Between September 1929 and January 1933, unemployment rose from 1.3 million to 6.1 million. This had a knock-on effect on taxes too. As American loans went up and the unemployed demanded welfare payments, the Weimar government had to dramatically raise taxes. This hit the middle classes hardest. These are the people who should have been the biggest supporters of Weimar democracy. This was almost an impossible situation, but the Weimar government had to come up with some sort of response. The crisis was not entirely of the Weimar government's making, but its decision to rely on American finances for economic stability had been a gamble. Whatever the facts, the German people typically blamed the politicians for their hardships. Chancellor Heinrich Brüning first tried higher taxes as a way to pay for the crisis, and then later he limited the time an unemployed person could claim unemployment benefits. Nobody was happy. Right-wingers opposed high taxes, left-wingers objected to limited benefits. Brüning had to increasingly rely on Article 38 of the Weimar Constitution to pass laws, as the coalitions of moderate parties in the Reichstag could not rule together. Article 48 was where the president could rule by decree without a Reichstag vote. There were 5 emergency decrees in 1930, but 44 in 1931, and this rose further to 66 in 1932. The Reichstag met only 13 times in 1932, as they couldn't agree anyway. The crisis made the Reichstag look powerless, and the outcry for a strong leader to intervene only increased. And that's more or less what was happening anyway, what with the use of Article 48. All this resulted in a period of intense political instability, and growing support for both the Nazis and the Communists. As Weimar democracy struggled to contain the crisis, people increasingly turned to extremist parties. This table will help us see the growth in their support. In the May 1928 election, the results had looked something like this. Each of these dots is a deputy in the Reichstag, with the different colours representing different parties. Fairly typical for the proportional representation of the time that no single party got a majority, so a coalition had to rule together. In May 1928, the Communists got 54 seats. They're the dark red over to the left. The SPD, the moderates, they got 152, the biggest party, but they couldn't rule on their own. And the Nazi Party got a measly 12. They're the brown shirts at the right-hand side of the diagram. That was all before the Wall Street crash though. Let's see what happens afterwards. In September 1930, there was another election. This time the Communists has increased their votes to 77, or rather seats rather than votes. The SPD had dropped to 143. The Nazis had seen the most dramatic rise though. They had gone up to 107 seats within the Reichstag. But that wasn't all. In July 1932, the Nazis had their best election ever, at least until the rather unfair election of 1933. This is how the Reichstag ended up looking. Again, no party had a majority, but look which party is now biggest. The Communists had increased their number of seats to 89. The SPD had fallen to 133, and the Nazis had stormed into the lead with 230. At this point, they felt entitled to claim that they should be leading the government. But not many people in the Reichstag, moderates especially, were prepared to work with them. So what to do? We'll come on to what the government did about this in our next video, but for now we'll sum up the effects of the Wall Street crash. The Wall Street crash of October 1929 was the collapse of the US stock market, which had a terrible effect on businesses, banks and unemployment. Germany was reliant on US money, so it had massive effects on the German economy too. Unemployment soared to 6.1 million people by 1933. Banks and businesses went bust. Government finances were ruined, leading to tax rises and unpopular policies. Virtually everyone in German society suffered at least a little, and the Weimar government got the blame. As a result, support for moderate parties in the Reichstag fell, and support for extremist parties, particularly the Nazis, soared. Nazi deputies in the Reichstag went from just 12 in May 1928 before the crisis to 230 seats in the Reichstag, the biggest party in the Reichstag by July 1932. And at this point, Hitler felt that he was approaching power. He was right, but there would have to be quite a lot of hoops to jump through first, and we'll look at those in a future video. For now though, that's the end of this video. Thanks very much for watching, and if it's been useful, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. For now though, goodbye.